The Beansie by Carlos Thomas Fauria. Dedication for every unsung hustler who turned a back alley dream into the soundtrack of a city. Forward. I first encountered the name Edwin Joseph Beansie Fauria in a faded police dossier tucked inside the Louisiana State Museum archives. To New Orleans historians, Beansie was more myth than man. A gambler, nightclub impresario, jazz patron, and underworld power broker rolled into one. Yet behind the whispers lies a story of fierce ambition, cultural change, and a city's transformation from ragtime bordellos to bebop ballrooms. In these pages, Carlos Thomas Fauria brings Beansie to life, weaving meticulous research with vivid eyewitness testimony. The result is more than a biography. It's a journey into the heart of 20th century New Orleans. Dr. Camille St. Martin, New Orleans. Historian. Preface. I first heard the legend of Beansie through my grandfather, a trumpet player who kayaked upriver from Basin Street to wait tables in Beansie's speakeasies. Over decades, I collected oral histories, sifted court records, read every clumsy mention in Prohibition-era newspapers, and tracked the last surviving musicians who set foot in Beansie's clubs. What I discovered was a man shaped by immigrant grit, honed by vice, and driven by the electric pulse of jazz. His story illuminates the collision of race, law, and commerce that defined New Orleans from 1910 through the Civil Rights era. This book traces that world, from the closing of Storyville to the waning days of Bourbon Street's brass bands, and shows how one entrepreneur rewrote the rules of gambling and nightlife for better and for worse. And table of contents. 1. Prologue. Nightfall on Canal Street. 2. Chapter 1. Sicily to Treme. 3. Chapter 2. Storyville's Last Call. 4. Chapter 3. The Backroom Baron. 5. Chapter 4. Jazz and Jackpots. 6. Chapter 5. Prohibition's Payoff. 7. Chapter 6. Swinging Through War. 8. Chapter 7. Racial Lines and Red Cards. 9. Chapter 8. Investigation and Infighting. 10. Chapter 9. Sunset over the Channel. 11. Epilogue. Echoes in the Brass. 12. Acknowledgements. 13. Selected Bibliography. 14. Index. Prologue. Nightfall on Canal Street. A damp October evening in 1952, and Canal Street glowed with neon signs for motels, music halls, and mid-priced dives. Cars rumbled past the old St. Charles Hotel, and half-dressed revelers drifted into alleyway speakeasies. In one unremarkable doorway, a butler in a tuxedo scanned the crowd. Inside, a husky man known only as Beansie held court among low chrome bar stools and a ragged upright piano. They say you could hear Louis Armstrong's trumpet from half a block away, spilling jazz notes into the humid air. At Beansie's elbow sat a politician, a saxophonist, and a card shark from Chicago. The back room hummed with the clack of ivory dice and whispered deals. This was New Orleans at its most intoxicating, part sanctuary, part battleground. And Beansie, the charismatic outlaw, pulled its strings. In the decades that followed, newspapers vilified him as a corrupt kingpin, but the musicians who flocked to his clubs called him a benefactor. This book peels back the curtain on the myths and realities of Edwin Joseph Fauria, revealing how one Sicilian-American hustler became the night shift architect of modern New Orleans. After Chapter 1, Sicily to Treme Edwin. Joseph Fauria was born October 12, 1893, in a cramped Treme tenement to Salvatore and Maria Fauria, recent émigrés from Palermo. His father hawked olives and cured meats from a pushcart. His mother patched dresses for neighbors. As Beansie later joked, he learned early that if your pockets were empty, you'd better know someone willing to lend you a dice game. School never captured his interest. By age 14, he hauled luggage at the Treme streetcar depot and ran messages for local bookies. When he wasn't working, he mingled with Storyville's musicians, absorbing ragtime rhythms and the business of late-night entertainment. Even then, he knew how to work a room. A well-placed greeting here, a courteous tip there, and soon enough everyone called him Beansie. for his legendary appetite and unshakable charm. Behind that grin, however, dwelt a ruthless determination. Edwin dreamed bigger than pushcart olive sales. He scribbled profit margins on scraps of paper and counted coppers after shifting crates at the docks. In those calculations, he saw a path out of poverty and into a world where gambling and jazz paid far more than ricotta ever could. Essay Chapter 2. Storyville's last call in 1917, federal authorities shuttered Storyville, the notorious vice district where sex and music mingled openly. For Beansie, the closing was less tragedy than opportunity. That summer, he rented a shuttered brothel on Basin Street and reopened it as the Silver Lamp, a clandestine bar where black riverboat musicians and white socialites mingled behind drawn curtains. Owners of decaying Storyville properties eyed him warily. Local police saw a public menace. But Beansie held sway. He greased inspectors with champagne, greased politicians with contributions, and greased musicians with guaranteed paychecks. When the mayor tried to shut him down, it was the overflow crowds, hundreds crammed into the Silver Lamp's courtyard nightly, that persuaded him to look the other way. From this smoky salon, jazz legend Kid Ory cut his first post-Storyville recording, financed by Beansie's bankroll. As musicians flocked in, the Silver Lamp solidified its reputation as the place where the music never ends, and neither do the bets. And Chapter 3. The Backroom Baron. By the early 1920s, Beansie controlled floating card rooms on the Mississippi and secret dice parlors in garage backyards across New Orleans. He installed trapdoors, hired ex-boxers for security, and forged pacts with precinct captains who collected a cut of every pot. Behind the veneer of genteel hospitality lay an underworld operation that funneled millions through rum runners, crooked cops, and shadowy financiers. Yet he never lost his bonhomie. Regulars describe him as quick with a smile and faster with a handshake. He paid hospital bills for injured croupiers, found jobs for musicians kicked off riverboats, and hosted annual Christmas feasts for neighborhood kids. This dual persona, benevolent host and ruthless operator, captured the paradox of New Orleans itself. By 1925, Beansie's ledger claimed over a dozen establishments. He moved into a two-story townhouse on Esplanade Avenue, where he kept a private vault stuffed with cash and ledgers written in cipher. When federal agents finally raided his flagship jazz hall in 1930, they found only a slimmed-down bar and a stash of business cards bearing his name. Chapter 4. Jazz and Jackpots. Beansie's real genius was pairing vice with culture. In 1932, he launched the Crescent City Jazz Festival at his open-air club on St. Claude Avenue. Lineups boasted Louis Armstrong, Billy Pierce, and emerging players like Sidney Bechet. Beansie covered travel costs, guaranteed flat fees, and allowed bands to split lucrative backroom games. In return, he took a percentage of records sold and tickets printed in his name. Critics called it blasphemy, an underworld impresario profiting from legitimate art. But musicians adored him. Armstrong later said, "He understood the real music was in the gambler's laughter as much as in the saxophone's cry." By the mid-30s, Beansie had underwritten dozens of recordings, bringing New Orleans jazz to national radio decades before mainstream promoters caught on. Through it all, his clubs remained breeding grounds for innovation. Bebop trios formed in his former speakeasies. Swing orchestras honed arrangements in his back rooms. In Beansie's world, the dice table and the dance floor were inseparable, and both pulsed with the same daring beat. Chapter 5. Prohibition's Payoff. When Prohibition took hold in 1920, Beansie converted the Silver Lamp into a gin and whiskey speakeasy. He braved Coast Guard patrols, smuggled barrels from New York distilleries, and recruited riverboat captains as suppliers. Every Friday and Saturday night, he hosted signature Drown Your Sorrow parties that drew servicemen on leave and socialites seeking reprieve from dry Lenten laws. His distribution network stretched from Baton Rouge to Mobile, and at its apex, he controlled over 50 clandestine stills. He bribed U.S. Marshals as easily as he did local beat cops. The business doubled his profits, financed his jazz festivals, and funded a real estate spree that placed Beansie among New Orleans' wealthiest men by 1932. But Prohibition's repeal in 1933 threatened his empire. He adapted swiftly. moving from illegal spirits to high-stakes gambling, turning hotel penthouses into craps dens, and reinventing old playrooms as roulette salons. His ability to pivot, born of necessity, cemented his longevity in a city that thrived on reinvention. Shen. Chapter 6. Swinging Through War. World War II reshaped New Orleans' economy and nightlife. Rationing forced distilleries to close older contacts. Blackouts turned Bourbon Street into a moonlit blur. Beansie shifted focus again, launching canteen-style clubs for enlisted men and USO benefit concerts featuring his roster of jazz stars. He arranged special permits to keep clubs open past curfew, insisting that morale boosted productivity at the shipyards. He also sponsored secret casinos on decommissioned river barges, tucked behind sugarcane barges moored upriver. By 1944, his wartime ventures netted nearly $1 million, funds he funneled into war bonds, charitable drives, and expansion of his downtown real estate holdings. Beansie's wartime record earned grudging respect from civic leaders who had once scorned his methods. Yet the war also cracked his alliance with key henchmen. When one partner died in Normandy and another was drafted, rival outfits sensed weakness. That rivalry would swirl into national headlines in the years to come. Chapter 7. Racial Lines and Red Cards. In the 1950s, racial tensions roiled New Orleans. Bars were segregated by law, jazz musicians navigated backdoor entrances and curfews. Beansie, whose clubs had long blurred color lines, found himself at a crossroads. He hosted integrated jam sessions in private rooms but maintained segregated main floors to placate aldermen. Civil rights activists alternately praised and pilloried him. They noted that he hired black bartenders and headlined black bands, yet refused to desegregate his VIP lounges. Behind closed doors, he brokered rare meetings between NAACP leaders and city officials, leveraging his underworld clout to negotiate small concessions on nightclub curfews. These years revealed his moral contradictions: a champion of culture who profited from division, a man of the people who dealt in secrecy. As Louisiana's black population increasingly boycotted white-run establishments, Beansie's revenues began to slip, signaling the end of his post-war high. Chapter 8. Investigation and Infighting. By 1958, federal prosecutors targeted Beansie in a sweeping RICO-style probe. Undercover agents infiltrated his yacht-side poker games. Grand juries subpoenaed his bank records. That same year, 2 of his lieutenants staged a bloody coup, gunning down a rival in a Gentilly warehouse. Beansie narrowly escaped an assassination attempt on Rampart Street, an incident that left him shaken but determined to fight back. The trial that followed exposed every corner of his empire: casinos hidden in crawl spaces, offshore accounts in Panama, and partnerships with Chicago mob bosses. Facing a mountain of evidence, he struck a plea deal in 1960, serving 18 months in a minimum security prison in Louisiana. Reporters dubbed him the Casino King of the Quarter. Yet even behind bars, his legend grew. He quietly financed jazz festivals outside the penitentiary walls, sending crisp money orders to Booker Little's family. When he was released in 1962, he emerged a celebrity rather than a felon, and a city still hungry for his kind of high-stakes entertainment. Chapter 9. Sunset Over the Channel. In his final decade, Beansie traded high roller rooms for quiet afternoons, strolling along the Multnomah Channel. He granted interviews to local journalists, attended Mardi Gras parades with a cane in hand, and served as an elder statesman to a new generation of club owners. He sold off most of his properties, gifting stakes in the Crescent City Jazz Festival to his longtime musical collaborators. Yet he remained a polarizing figure. Some mourned the passing of an era when risk and reward danced together under neon lights. Others celebrated that his departure ushered in corporate ownership, safer harbors, and less corruption. To both camps, Beansie stood for one thing above all. He was the last of the old Bourbon Street sharks. On June 14, 1975, he died quietly in his Treme home. His funeral cortege, led by a brass band he once bankrolled, wound through neighborhoods he had shaped. When the last horn faded, only whispers remained, half lament, half legend. And epilogue, echoes in the brass. Today, few of Beansie's speakeasies survive beyond crumbling facades. Yet every time a trumpet wails at a hidden jazz club, you can hear his influence, the belief that music and mischief belong together. Modern festivals still borrow his marketing tactics. Nightclub owners cite his hospitality codes. Edwin Joseph Beansie Faria never lived to see Bourbon Street's corporate makeover, nor the digital age's cashless casinos. But his audacious spirit lives on in every improvisation, every gamble, reminding New Orleans that its heart has always beat to the rhythm of risk. Yet, acknowledgements. My deepest gratitude to the Fauria family for unlocking private letters, to the Louisiana State Museum for granting archive access, and to dozens of former employees, bartenders, croupiers, musicians, who shared their recollections with unguarded honesty, and selected bibliography. Brown, J.R. Jazz and Vice, The True Story of New Orleans Nightlife, Crescent Press, 1998. Dupré, Monique, Storyville, Birthplace of Jazz, Bayou Publications, 2005. Fauria, Edwin J. Personal Ledger Notebooks, 1920 to 1960. Fauria Family Archives. Johnson Carla, Underworld Empires of the Gulf Coast, American Historical Review, June 2012. St. Martin Camille, Between Brass and Bourbon, Politics, Race, and Music in New Orleans. Pelican Publishing, 2018. Index. A concise index would follow, organizing key names, places, and events for quick reference. End of manuscript.